But aside the 8.5-year interval between 9/11 and the 1993 Trade Center bombing, with Oklahoma City bombing being right in the middle, it's a shame that these three unresolved and sensitive events, which have become major social impacts on everyday life, seem overwhelmingly connected and in unusual, contrary circumstances, are not seriously being dealt by a realistic activist movement or archetypal organization, pursuing real truth and accountability for who or what is ultimately at fault, even if becoming disillusioned by discovering vulnerabilities and weaknesses within the establishment that have played a role in judicial obstructions and cover-ups. But there is much documentation regarded as circumstantial evidence about Terry Nichols, already married to a Philippine mail-order wife, Marif, that he, by himself, frequented the Philippines at the same time Ramzi Yousef and company were present, and that it could link to the Oklahoma City bombing as Al-Qaeda and on to 9/11, and subsequently after the Trade Center bombing. According to Oklahoma author Mitchell Gray, who was intimately called upon as an Arabic-speaking immigration attorney for Zacharias Moussaoui's roommate, Hussein Al-Attas, who had also been incarcerated for INS violations just before 9/11, an account that is the basis of his first book, I Heard You Were Going on Jihad, How a Minnesota FBI Agent May Have Prevented a Second Wave of Attacks Before 9/11 and Exposed the Oklahoma Terror Network, on pages 79 and 80, indicates that Gray had been in contact with Congressman Dana Rohrabacher's staff, which provided him a report about a link between Terry Nichols and Ramzi Yousef through phone records that revealed during his 5 months living in the United States, he placed 3 phone calls to a residence of a Filipina in Queens, New York named Myla Densing, with one call lasting approximately 30 minutes. At the time of the phone calls, Densing was living in the same row house apartment building as Adoro and Ernesto Malalan, close friends and neighbors who were also from Cebu City. Ernst Malalan is the cousin of Marif Nichols and owned the boarding house in Cebu City where Terry and Marif lived during their last trip to the Philippines. And there are still unanswered questions regarding Ramzi Yousef and his extended families, past and present, that we don't have enough time to cover their whereabouts, even though we've covered quite a bit of controversial links from him and his family of greater infamy. But separate from the many unanswered questions around Timothy McVeigh and the OKC bombing, a scenario of Ramzi Yousef and Terry Nichols crossing paths and networking is highly unlikely to most Americans. But when considering the 2 years of terrorist activities Yousef carried out as a fugitive after the 93 bombing throughout the Philippines, Thailand, Iran, and Pakistan, as with being contracted to assassinate Benazir Bhutto in 1994, only 2 assassinations have been attributed to the so-called Al-Qaeda organization. Ahmed Shah Massoud, the leader of the Northern Alliance in Afghanistan 2 days before 9/11, and then tragically with Benazir Bhutto in 2007. Not even Noser-killing Meir Kahana is counted. So if you still think Yousef's terrorist aspirations are exclusive to the Islamic mindset, when considering the cross path with Terry Nichols, viewers can also read up on what Peter Lance also uncovered in 2013 with a sting set up on Yousef after his arrest while incarcerated in New York by the feds along with inmate and son of infamous mafia hitman for the Colombo crime family, Gregory Scarpa Jr., that was carried out by him as an informant jailed with Yousef in 1996. From that revelation with the discussions carried out between the two, you might want to envision Yousef having been a contract terrorist instead. And besides for 1995 being framed as a white militia conspiracy, Oklahoma in the Midwest, with Texas, is a central hub noted for Middle Eastern terrorists ahead of 9/11, as a couple of hijackers stayed in Oklahoma City before momentarily. Mohammed Atta, Marwan al-Shehi, and Nawaf al-Hazmi, plus Zacharias Moussaoui had actually lived there, attending flight school in Norman, Oklahoma. But the presence there in Oklahoma is still prevalent in the past by the same apparatus before, in the late 80s, with Wadi al-Haj, who was living in Texas at the time, met up with Mahmoud Abu Halima at an Islamic conference in Oklahoma, where it is said that Abu Halima told El-Haj to buy a .38 caliber revolver for him and that it was the same one that Noser used to kill Kahana. And Oklahoma seems to be more like a crossroads or central point, because also take notice of who resides in Texas. Like Yousef's close friend Abdel Hakim Marad, not only did he receive pilot training more than any 9/11 hijacker, he had also trained in San Antonio and is completely in the middle of the Bojinka plot, where then, after the Oklahoma City bombing, he admitted verbally on April 19, 1995, and in writing, that Ramzi Yousef's Liberation Army was responsible for the OKC bombing. Liberation Army is the same title Nadal Ayad had left as a phone-recorded message taking blame for the Trade Center bombing. And then there's Hussein al-Hussein, the supposed Iraqi that's the focus in Jana Davis's book. the third terrorist. Despite her marginalizing other competing theories about the Oklahoma City bombing, her pursuit on al-Hussein and all those linked was just. And even if her findings and conclusions are embraced by neocon opportunists and their attempts for Iraq war pretext, the consequences or legal actions taken against Davis in writing her book by the power of al-Hussein's legal team should be questioned, especially when it was later revealed that al-Hussein was working at Boston Logan Airport, where hijacked flights 11 and 175, both planes that hit the World Trade Center, departed from during the period of the September 11th attacks, and was even questioned by authorities after. But even after the Oklahoma City bombing, and before moving to the Boston area, Hussein al-Hussein also moved to Irving, Texas, where he had been arrested for a DUI there.